Hello and welcome back to the AI Ethics Now podcast. My name is Tom Ritchie and I'm really pleased today to be joined by Liesl. Hi Liesl.
Hi, great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. I wonder, Liesl, if you could tell us a little bit more about your current role and what brings you to this discussion around AI, please.
Sure. So, from a professional point of view, I am the Senior Digital Library Advisor at Leeds Beckett. That is a very long and convoluted way of saying I'm the copyright expert at Leeds Beckett. If anyone has any copyright questions for the library, it all comes to me. And obviously, in that vein, a lot of AI questions come. A lot of people are quite confused over what they're allowed to do, what is absolutely fine. But I admit I'm also very interested in a personal point of view. So I'm sort of coming at it with the twin hats of work context, copyright. I need to make sure that we're all following the rules. But as someone who is very interested in tech, how can we help people understand the new technology and feel less anxious about it?
Thank you, Liesl, for sharing a little bit more about what you do. And I think we can have a really interesting conversation today about some of the challenges of AI and copyright. So let's get into the first question then. How accessible is AI technology, do you think, to the general public and businesses today?
So, there's sort of multiple parts to this for me. I have noticed when we've been doing things within the library, getting access to AI that generates text content is actually quite easy. We've got a co-pilot subscription through university, which everyone uses a lot. We also use ChatGPT and Claude quite a bit on the free versions and haven't really noticed any quality difference for the fact that they're free. That being said, we've been trying to do a bit of work with images, and that has been a bit more problematic. A lot of the platforms that we quite like have a subscription model, they have limited credits. So I think that's problem number one of different types of inputs seem to have different costs attached to them. The other thing, to come back to the idea of anxiety, a lot of people are just nervous to get started. So while the tools are there, they don't really know how to find them. They don't really know what the tools do and what happens to things that are inputted into it and what happens with what comes out of it as well. So people are just falling at that first stall of using AI because they don't know what they're doing. So that's one of the things I'm really keen to promote is giving them the tools to get over the anxiety.
And do you find that anxiety is that predominantly students, or is there staff in there as well in your context at Leeds Beckett?
So interestingly, staff, it's been a mixed bag. A lot of people are coming at it with a perspective of going, I know nothing, but I want to learn. And they're getting quite involved at trying to upskill. With students, it really varies. We've got some people who are very keen on trying to learn the skills. They're really keen to come and talk to us about it. But you also do have some people, particularly in the creative sector, who just look at AI and go, that's the plagiarism machine. That's the machine that's taking my content. And they're immediately not interested because of the way AI has been sold in the public perspective.
Yeah, and I think that there are a lot of different representations of AI in the media, particularly through social media and perhaps more traditional media that tend to be more on the negative or techno-skeptic side of things. I love that the fact that you've got students and staff who are keen to use this, but it is a really challenging discussion, I think, to have. Something in my work that I come across is we talk a lot about the hidden curriculum. How do we tell students what we expect from them? And one of the big challenges we've seen in relation to AI and using AI tools is just that people don't always know how to reference them. They don't know how to talk about them. And so because there is quite a lot, I think, across the sector of this blanket no AI use, even though we know that actually quite a lot of people use AI in day-to-day tasks and other things, it makes people feel they have to hide it. And so it creates this unbelievably loud silence about the role that AI plays in some of our work. You also raised, I think, a really good point about understanding what happens to the inputs and outputs of these AI platforms, particularly, I think, around those that create images and other media that aren't just text-based. And it leads me on to the second question I've got, really, which it links into your experience about copyright, which is, what do you think are the biggest challenges facing AI development today from a copyright perspective?
So, this is where I'm actually far more interested in input into the AI. Output is very interesting. I do feel like there's a lot of, you need to declare what you've got from an AI and exactly where that content has come from. At Leeds Beckett, we have, as part of submission, an ethics procedure where you declare any AI use and what you've done as part of it, which I think is really good. I think if you use AI, you should always credit it, just like you would any other source or tool. And I've seen other universities doing similar to get students thinking about crediting that use. Leeds University has a really interesting traffic light system where they go, in these courses, it's a red light. Don't use AI at all. We don't want you to. We don't expect you to. Please don't. Orange light, you can, it's not obligatory. And then you have green light, where it's much more encouraged, and it's almost a bit expected that you're going to be using AI as a tool. So I think there's lots going on with output, but that, to be honest, isn't what interests me. The input is the big issue, and I think that's where a lot of the techno-skepticism comes from as well, is not understanding what happens with things that go into the AI. This has not been helped by the UK government. They originally said that any content stored within an LLM is going to be part of text and data mining exemptions. You're covered on a copyright perspective. Don't worry about it. They've now gone back on that and basically said, we're going to see what case law does, which means that any creative work that's put into AI, those authors are panicking. They're taking steps to protect themselves because they don't want their work sitting in an AI model, basically. And because they feel the law isn't protecting them, they're taking it upon themselves. You'll also see a lot of publishers now have declarations saying, do not put this content into an AI. Fair play to the AI companies. They've done a lot to try and fix this as well. The two big things that's been really interesting for me is you can now switch off the function on most AI, certainly ChatGPT and Copilot, of hosting. When you put something into the AI, when you put in the input, that isn't automatically added to their large language model. It can just be disappeared afterwards. So that is concern number one, because that's where I have a problem. If you're feeding copyrighted information into an AI, it has to be stuff you own, because otherwise you're giving permission on behalf of a copyright holder for their work to become part of a large language model, and they might not want to give that. The other thing that AI companies are doing is they are doing license agreements with various publishers. So OpenAI have a deal with Axel Springer, and there have been a lot of contracts made with UK publishers as well. And that seems to be the trend now of AI companies going, we've got lots of bad press for people not really knowing what sits in our AI model. So what we're going to do is we're going to get it licensed, and therefore it's all above board. The copyright holders can't complain as they're still getting royalties.
Yeah, and I think to pick up on a couple of things you've mentioned, the RAG model at Leeds, the red, amber, green model, it raises a lot of questions, because when I think about the students on the course that I'm teaching, all of them are from different disciplines. And there's this desire amongst students to want to have access to that. So whilst I completely understand the red, amber, green approach of don't use it in this space, but you can use it in this space, students may not agree with that. Students may think, no, I want to be trained or have experience with AI as well, because it will have an impact in my field. So I understand the model, but yeah, there's a lot of questions I think that we could ask beyond that, of how does that work in practice. I really like that you focus on the input side of it as well, because I think we speak a lot in relation to data ethics and data privacy around particularly spaces like Midjourney, where they're just taking other creators' work, passing it off as its own, and we never know. You would never know from asking it to create a certain image. But I think your point about the challenges that come with copyright on the input side, now that seems to be where a lot more of this discussion needs to be had. So I think it's a really interesting point that you've raised. I've mentioned about some of the ethical challenges, perhaps, of outputs on these AI models, particularly around Midjourney and others, where they're scraping people's data and then using it to create new outputs that can then be used to generate profit. So I wonder, what are the ethical considerations in training AI models with copyrighted material, do you think?
So, first of all, ideally have permission. Have permission from the copyright holder. It means you're not running into that, for want of a better word, anti-feeling towards AI, where people are going, the robots are taking my content. They're taking my content and they're putting me out of a job. Now, discussions over AI and creativity aside, it just looks bad when your input and your output are both making copyright holders really anxious. And I know there's been a lot of commentary as well about what material AI has scraped that they haven't got permission for. So I know it's made a lot of people far more anxious about open access, and also way more anxious about free repositories where you can get information. There's a lot of ethical considerations there. So ideally, I would love it if creators can go, do you know what? I'd like my work to go in a large language model. Here's my agreement with you. Ideally, get some financial compensation, but that depends. You might have people who feel passionately about their work being a part of it. That being said, though, the other issue is the volume. Obviously, a lot of input needs to go into these models. They are called large language models for a reason. They have so much data and they need to get it from somewhere. So there are also a lot of ethics over what a lot of these are built on originally. We cycle back to things like shadow libraries, like Books 3. There's a really interesting set of articles in The Atlantic, I think it is, talking about these illegal downloads of various fictional books, which have been used to create these large language models. That content, the copyright holders didn't give permission, but it's also content that is straight up breaking copyright law. So I think if AI wants to improve in terms of their ethical framework, there needs to be a lot more transparency over what they've got in the model and where they've got it from.
I also think that we need to give some thought to how we want to provide our data to these large language models and other forms of AI, because there are challenges we know around bias that exists in AI because of narrow training data. So there is a preponderance for Anglophonic, so models that use English and the English language, but we know that the majority of people alive on the planet don't speak English. And so how do we ensure that they are equally represented in this? But to do that, we have to be bus data that it can then use when you're asking it the questions later on or asking it to generate things. And I think that's something that, again, we don't talk about a huge amount, is it leads us a little bit into the area of post-humanism. How do we understand ourselves in relation to AI and how it's developing? But I think it's I'm going to use the word, it's a really interesting thing that we have to come to terms with, is what role do we understand ourselves to have in relation to training AI? We don't just want to leave it to companies that own these massive platforms. We need to be critical thinkers, and it's something that we're hoping to do with all the students on the course, is encourage them to think critically about how can they share good data, in quotes.
There is tangential to all this, but I think it's worth saying. Obviously, a lot of this is me going, there's a lot of copyright implications here, it's really bad. I think it's worth saying about a lot of the negativity around AI is actually really unpleasant when you look at who most benefits from AI. And that is one of the reasons why I'm actually really passionate about, can we work together to get better copyrighted material and data sets? Because if you look at students who English isn't their first language, they might be using it as a translation tool or to assist with making sure that they've got the best understanding of the material, getting it summarized down for them. I know quite a few friends who identify as neurodiverse who say that AI is great for doing things like composing a standardized email or summarizing content for them, which would just require so much energy and thought process for them to do otherwise. I think it's really important to acknowledge when we shout about how bad AI is, who are we actually defending and who are we letting fall by the wayside?
Someone else that I've spoken to through this podcast raised this idea of nothing for us without us. And it's something that I've really thought a lot about since, which is we need to try to make sure that voices are included within this technology, as many voices as critically as possible. But that means we have to understand how to communicate these concepts. We have to understand how to explain the technology and how it's working, and actually why has it reached that decision? Why has it produced that output from the question I asked? And that's a real challenge around AI black boxing that is being worked on and constantly being refined, but is going to be a challenge, particularly as these large language models, as you said, they're going to continue to grow. They're going to get more complicated. Well, that makes that more difficult every single time to be able to then explain it to your average user in the street. I wonder then, just for the last question on this, how do you think AI challenges our understanding of copyright and authorship? We've spoken a lot about some elements of it, but I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts on that.
Sure. So, from a legal point of view, this seems to be relatively cut and dried. From a UK and US perspective, we're mostly building on an idea of author which was defined in a case called the selfie monkey case. You might have run across it. Basically, a photographer set up his camera so a group of monkeys would take selfies of themselves. And there was this fantastic selfie taken by a monkey, which he then proceeded to try and copyright. Lo and behold, Wikipedia turned around and went, that's a monkey that took that photo. Does a monkey have a status as a legal entity, as a creator, to be able to hold that? So there are a few legal cases, but it was ultimately concluded that if you are a creator, you are a human being. There are set definitions you have to meet to have the ability to make copyright. That seems to be holding pretty steady of that's what they're saying about AI. You can't copyright AI work because an AI is not a human being. That being said, that isn't the case everywhere. India has recently had a case where an AI has been recognized as a creator. There's a piece inspired by Van Gogh's Starry Night, which they were able to get copyright of. So it is one of those ones where right now the legal definition is pretty clear. And I think it's probably going to stay that way because otherwise, who are you actually crediting? Are you crediting the AI platform that you got it off of? Are you, as the person who generated the request, the copyright holder because you got it to produce the answer you wanted? Or is it maybe the people who trained the data or any inspirations that went into that work? There's lots of people who could get a stake, and just saying it's as simple as Midjourney created it isn't really an answer. That being said, I think from a moral and personal point of view, AI as creator is going to become more recognized on a sort of informal basis. Like I know a lot of people talk about the tells of AI art and looking out for them, and same with AI written word. So although they're not legally recognized as creator, there's definitely things that are being seen as that's an AI style of creation.
Thank you, Liesl. I think the case of the monkey and copyright, as you've discussed, you can see the challenges that come with that, and around how we attribute copyright and who can copyright what. I think is going to become more challenging with AI until we can explain these things much more clearly and understand how data is being used in some cases. It's going to be quite challenging. I wonder, we've tended to speak about some more of the negative connotations of AI. I wonder if you'd have any thoughts on what could we do to work towards a positive future with AI?
Point number one for me is very much what the AI companies are already doing, getting licensing for copyrighted works. Fantastic. That is something I've been wanting in the last year or so of studying this, and I'm really pleased it's starting to happen. But the other thing I'm really optimistic about is AI is increasingly being seen as one item within your toolkit of academic tools. There is a really interesting load of work being done by some academics at Swansea University, Matthias Dilling and Leah Owen, where they've looked at what AI is actually good at. And on the one hand, it's quite a negative piece. They fed a load of prompts into the AI and got it to generate essay answers, which they then marked as though they were students, and then compared with students' work that they already had. On the one hand, very negative, lots of imagined resources, a lot of repetition. I think they reckoned if they were grading it as actual students, they would come in at a 2-1 at best, and most of them were sat around 2-2, a third level. But on the other hand, they have a lot of positive things to say about what AI is good at. It is very good at specific analysis and doing good summaries of content. And I think where we need to move forward is when we have those outputs, making sure we're using AI for areas where it really shines, because there are areas where AI is absolutely the correct tool to be using. The problem at the moment is because we're all trying to get up to speed, we're just using AI for everything. And that means we're not always deploying it in the best way.
Yeah, I think that's going to be something that we think a lot more about in years to come, that much more intentional approach to using AI, whether that's the questions we're asking, how we're using it, or whether it's the platform itself. And if we will be able to understand the different ethical standards that AI will have. And if an AI is seen to have better ethics or a more robust approach to governance around their bias and how they can reduce it, will people be more likely to go and use that than one that perhaps doesn't have the same standards? But as you say, we're not quite there yet. We're still in this very early phase of just trying to see what it can do, how we can use it. And it's a bit of a wild west, it feels like, of people just trying to see what this tool can do. Thank you so much, Liesl. I think it's been a really interesting discussion, and definitely not an angle of AI that I'd considered before, particularly in relation to copyright. So thank you so much for joining us and for speaking to us today. And have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll speak to you very soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.